into to fight Bowser. Like, what even is that? There's like the 3 rings at the bottom that you just kind of disappear into.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that sticks out to me is that infinite staircase.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That is like forefront of my mind when I think of Mario 64. So it got me so good.
When I was running up it for like half an hour, man, I gotta be getting close, right? Turn around and the bottom's like right there.
Swear, I'm supposed to go there. I swear.
Sometimes life feels like that to me.
Right.
I've been running uphill this whole time.
Oh, big
but like only like 10 feet off the ground.
Well, there's a cold open.
Hi, I'm John, and I'm a gamer.
Hi, John.
Gaming has come a long way over the last several decades. The debate on whether the medium is art has largely ended with a very conclusive yes, and around the world we're finally seeing people treat it with more of the respect that it deserves. With that in mind, and because I'm just as much of a game talker as I am a game player, I went around to all my gamer buddies to enlist their help in discussing games as art. So, if you love gaming as much as I do, then join us. Trust me, you're among friends. Listen in as we discuss the themes, gameplay, and whatever else comes to mind. It's like a book club, but gaming. Today's topic?
Super Mario 64. Alright. Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of the Book Club Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, John, and with me today are Adrien.
Hey, John.
And Joel.
Hey, how's it going?
This is episode 6. Today we're going to be talking about Super Mario 64, which is one I've been pretty excited about. Before we get into it, I have a bit of a tradition. Joel, this is your first time experiencing it, but I always like to start this way. So we all grew up playing this game. Listening to that opening theme, what emotions do you feel?
First thing that comes to mind, so Mario 64, first Nintendo 64 game I ever played. Mm-hmm. And so my first memory is very vividly 2nd grade, thinking of it while I'm in class and like daydreaming of, and I had to pull this list up so I could remember the name of the actual levels, but Bob-omb Battlefield, mm-hmm. the one where you have to climb to the top and you hit the giant Bob-omb King guy is up there. Mm-hmm. Very vivid memory of like being in class, just daydreaming of like, I need to get back up to the top of the hill so I can fight that dude.
That's such a real feeling. I remember that as a kid too. Like I can't wait to get home so I can play, even if not this game, just a game that I rented from Blockbuster mm-hmm. or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, same here, you know. It was one of the first 3 games I owned, and I think it may have been the first or second game I ever turned on my N64, which was my first console. And, you know, hearing that intro, and, I mean, it really was, at the time I didn't quite realize how mind-blowing it was, but, like, the graphical jump and capability, and you have Mario just pop up with his face, and you're like, flipping around with it and mm-hmm. stretching him out and making him look like weird.
Yeah. Like he's made of silly putty or something.
Yeah.
You can just really manipulate it. That was one thing that I was like, you could literally spend half an hour to an hour as a kid just playing around with it. And I did several mm-hmm. times. Like, just the malleability of his face. And sometimes he could get to like stick in a position for a second before it like kind of started shifting back.
Yeah, I think if you held down a button, it would hold.
Oh, okay.
Like really mess with him.
I think the coolest part of that too is like little Easter egg in Mario Party, how they use that as an actual mini game.
Yeah, we have the.
It's the exact same. It looks identical,
mm-hmm.
and it's just matched the face by stretching Mario's features or Luigi
or Bowser's too. Yeah, but like it started with the Mario.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's just kind of. Go ahead.
Yeah, the fun little bit of trivia there is that particular scene was, I believe, it was basically one of the first 3D scenes that Nintendo got working on the N64, and that scene got shipped to other developers as an example of like, hey, this is how you get rendering working on the console.
It definitely feels like a very show-offy thing to start. Like, and I honestly think that was on purpose. Mm-hmm. I feel like a big part of the point of this game was to kind of show off the hardware as well as what could be done in video games moving forward. Yeah.
very much, this is 3D.
Yeah, and this is how you do it. Because there had been 3D games before. There had even been 3D platformers before on other systems that just failed on so many levels that this game really got right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, like, just the jump, because I followed, as growing up with my brothers, we had an NES, we had a Super Nintendo, and both of those, like, you could see the jump from Nintendo to Super Nintendo, and like Ninja Turtles, I love that game on the old Nintendo, very like arcade. And then you go to like, okay, you have Donkey Kong Country on Super Nintendo, but yeah, the jump from that to Mario 64, just, you made me think of this. Like, I didn't even think about it as a kid, how mind-blowing that jump was.
Yeah.
Because now you see, like, year over year, you see some minor improvements from, console to console, but back then that was revolutionary.
Yeah.
It changed the landscape. It really did. And it made other companies like Sega or whoever go, oh shit. Like, okay, we kind of have to step it up now.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think Mario 64 was Nintendo saying this is 3D gaming. You know, a bit of both a victory lap and this is how it's done.
Right, definitely set a lot of industry standards. Things that maybe were improved over time as we went on into the generations, but things that, like, you could say if it wasn't Mario 64, another game would have done it eventually. Yeah. But who's to say, really? Because, like, yeah, I mean, people point to it for a reason. Like, and it's not perfect. I think, especially after playing more recent Mario titles, I think that its flaws really show. People really dog on Super Mario Sunshine a lot because it removed a lot of the things that they really liked about the control scheme in Mario 64. But what exists in Sunshine, I think, is much tighter control-wise. So I think people, they let their nostalgia glasses kind of shield their eyes about some of the flaws, but I definitely think it was revolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think, aside from just showing off the graphical prowess and the technology and what 3D gaming could be, what do you guys think the creators of this game were trying to accomplish with Super Mario 64?
Just top of my head, I think they were trying to push the boundaries of what a gaming experience could be. Going to a point where, and remind me, do you remember what the release date was? This is one of the early Nintendo 64. It was a launch title. So to me, it was kind of a like, hey, this is now you experience playing a game, and it almost felt like a shift to we want to put you in the world. And I think for me, just looking at all the side scrollers that I played before that point, it was very like, this is fun. This is like, it felt to me, if this makes sense, the transition from this is a game to this is an experience. At least for me, like exploring a 3D landscape, it felt much more real. It felt much more tangible.
It's a lot more immersive.
Big time. And seeing what they did for a launch title, I mean, it set a very high bar. And I think it influenced a lot of what came after it. And I may be like jumping ahead and kind of going off topic, but like the idea of a hub world. Huge, and that's something that showed up very prominently in a lot of games that came out in like 2010 and onward. Games like Demon's Souls had a hub world, and it almost identical to Mario 64, whereas like you went into different portals.
Yeah,
that was something that was in like the 90s in Mario 64, which is amazing.
Yeah,
that other games were taking influence from that 15, 20 years later.
Yeah, well, why don't we just talk about the hub world a little bit? I think the hub world is uniquely suited to 3D because there were 2D games that did things that kind of looked like hub worlds, and they really felt like glorified level select screens. You had games that were a little bit more open world, like Metroidvanias, which were more about a continuous world, but the hub world, it was like, I think even some like Kirby games, you've got some games where it's like, okay, the character kind of walks around a platform area and goes into a door. But in 3D, you can do so much more with the hub world. And they really turned it into a sandbox where you can learn the controls. They turned it into a place that you can find secrets and a level select screen all at the same time.
Yeah. And when I think about it, I think it's like the next logical step from what you could call the hub world of Super Mario World, which was just Dinosaur Island, going from level to level with little dots. But in that game, there wasn't as many like secrets. You couldn't like just push left and suddenly go to a new level.
Yeah.
You had to like unlock it in some ways within another level. In this game, it was that blank wall, that's a level. Like
Yeah, exactly.
That clock face, that's a level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You look up at the sun shining down in the lobby of the castle, that's a level. Like
I totally forgot about that. Yeah, that was such a cool. Yeah.
Mind blowing.
Yeah. Oh.
it just it really lends itself. And you were talking about all the games that have drawn influence from it since. In the Ocarina of Time episode, we talked about how one of the original ideas for that game was to do something very similar and have the areas all sectioned off through some kind of a hub castle. What do you think are the advantages of doing this game the way that it was with a hub world rather than have it be more open world exploring like Zelda Ocarina of Time or even the very recently released Bowser's Fury?
I think the actual idea of the hub world kind of made it seem more like a magical experience so like Ocarina of Time is incredible. One of my favorite games. I love that it's this giant kind of interconnected world with different areas, different terrain, which is cool or interesting because Mario 64 has the different types of terrain, the different levels. You have water, you have desert, fire, like a clock. You have so many different types.
The four elements right there.
Yeah, the clock element. Yeah, like there's so many different types of level design.
You joke about that, but there is a game where clock is an element.
For real? What game is that?
That Kaitos.
That's a...
You just like hit people with time magic. Clock! Sorry.
No, all good. But I think having that, the paintings are always something that stick out to me. And I think there's something really kind of artsy that Nintendo did with that. Instead of saying, yeah, here, go through this, doorway and you're going to enter into another area that has, a desert. Jumping into like a portal of sorts kind of creates this weird, like mystic kind of feel to the game where you're like, I don't really get why this is happening, but I'm just going to go with it.
It's very whimsical.
Yeah, it is. And I think it added a certain charm and a uniqueness to it that maybe other games kind of were able to take notes from and say, hey, that's kind of an interesting idea. How can we kind of twist that now? And it's cool because you still see callbacks to it. Dark Souls has one where you go into a painted world. It's like this really weird, obscure thing. You have to like find a doll item and take it to this painting. And if you have the doll, you're able to look at the painting and you get sucked in. Like super inspired by Mario, if I think so, at least.
And it's very secret oriented too.
Very much so. And I think it was just something that kind of changed the idea of what a world had to look like. As we know it, like reality is very grounded. We know the rules, the laws of physics. And this was like, we're going to have you're going to feel like you're in a world, but it's got some twists and turns that made it kind of unique and special.
Yeah, and I think it was kind of uniquely suited to some of the Mario ethos, which it's always been very whimsical. The story's never been very complicated, and they don't even really try too hard. But, Mario's always been this game where it's like the hills have like eyes in the background, you're like stomping on mushroom people.
The sun is very angry at you.
Right, and yes. I think that ties in pretty well with just kind of that kind of off-kilter, non-realistic theming that Mario has always used.
That's a great point. I also think it's a really good way to kind of tie in the fact that each of these levels is very, like, you can see the boundaries of them. I'd say maybe the main exception being the desert, which kind of starts to feel boundless if you, like, look past but you can still find the edge of the stage where you would, like, fall off, so to speak, and that exists in most of the levels. And I think that in some levels, like that has not aged super well. The lava level is one of them where it just kind of feels kind of barren, like this floating lava platform with a bunch of stuff in it.
Yeah.
Fun platforming in it, but like overall environmentally, the aesthetic is not quite all there. But the fact that each of these is like a world existing within a painting, which itself, a painting, when you think about it, has the frame around it. It's everything that's inside the frame.
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah. So that ties really well into it for me. Like, you just have this one slice of a world that you can kind of explore a little bit, and then once you leave it, you just enter back into the hub world, which does feel a little bit more full and detailed and really more like a real location.
I've never thought of that. That's a really cool metaphor.
Yeah, and like when you're in the courtyard, or not the courtyard, the outside of Peach's castle, it's surrounded by those hills, and then of course the beach with the ocean. So it doesn't feel like it. You can see the boundaries of it quite so clearly as any of the actual individual levels.
That's a good
in
point.
my opinion.
That's a great point.
The key exception to that being the clock, which because it's encased in within itself, does kind of feel a little bit more like a realistic location to me, as crazy as it sounds.
Right.
That's a good point. I actually didn't think about that, but you're right. The clock, it felt like you kind of got minimized into it, whereas the paintings are kind of this weird, like, how do you explain this logically? You can't really.
Right.
But it's like the clock. We've seen Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Like, I mean, I guess theoretically we can imagine getting shrunk into a clock.
Yeah, but have you ever opened a clock and
seen what you see in Mario? No,
Right.
no,
I did.
I can't say I have.
My dad was very mad at me.
Son, what did you do to my clock?
You don't blame me, man. You bought the N64.
All right, so just kind of going up the question stack a little bit, back to what we thought that Nintendo was kind of setting out to do with the game.
Yeah.
So I think one really critical thing that they were trying to do is they were trying to teach people to play 3D games. Mario 64 very clearly is trying to push people who might be gamers, who might not be gamers, trying to teach them this is how to play games that you might run into in the future. And they're also setting the standard for what controls should look like. This is probably the first successful 3D platformer. There, like we discussed, there were some before that, but it didn't really have it. It was probably the first game to really introduce the public to the idea of a third-person camera and controlling it. It brought a lot of innovations to the forefront, and it has a bunch of things in it to try to help people understand it. So you talked about like the metaphor of the edges of the painting. You've also got the metaphor of Lakitu, who is the first character you see when you turn on the game, who has a camera on his fishing pole, and very clearly is telling the player, your camera is Lakitu, it's not Mario. You can move Lakitu around. He's gonna be your eyes, but Mario is your character. Apart from that, there's also, in terms of setting the standard for what you might call controls or the character controller, all of Mario's movements move smoothly into each other, and it seems very different from a lot of previous games that are very clunky and don't really transition very well. This is entirely 3D. Nothing flickers like it did when you were dealing with sprites back in the day. It's like, this is kind of, Nintendo was setting the bar.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of stuff to be said about, and just to go back to that, how creative with the Lakitu as the camera. It is such a genius way. It's not that the game isn't enjoyable for people of all ages, but it's such a really good way to get kids to understand the concept of the camera as an actual, if not character, then like a physical thing. And there's a lot of things in the game that really support that. Some things that I found to be very frustrating in this last playthrough, like because the Lakitu is a physical thing, I think mostly so that you wouldn't end up with him behind a wall somewhere unable to see Mario. They made him physically incapable of passing through any kind of object that Mario couldn't pass through. And there were times where I'm grateful for that, but then there were other times like in the second Bowser level, when you're going up this one elevator, if you've positioned the camera so that Lakitu, air quotes, is underneath the platform that you're about to come up through, then the camera will stay there and try to look up through the platform at you, and it can't. And stuff like that will happen pretty frequently, at least it did in my playthrough. So it's again, it's like a symbol of like, okay, it wasn't perfect, but for the time, like that's pretty damn cool. But,
yeah, one really interesting thing is that Mario 64 was actually developed in concert with the N64 hardware. So one of the reasons that we had the C buttons was because of this need. to control the camera in 3D.
Wow. So like the whole, that's like a whole section of gaming controllers that exists today just because this one game needed it.
Well, and I think it would have happened anyways, and I think other game developers figured out pretty quickly that the 4-directional C buttons were not sufficient and moved on to the second joystick controls that we still use today.
Which Nintendo was kind of late on, compared to everyone else. Like, they came into it kind of late.
Not until the GameCube.
Yeah.
Oh man, but even the GameCube, the C stick on the GameCube was
not great.
If you played any first-person shooters on the GameCube, it is painful to use the C stick as the camera as your reticle move.
It's almost worse trying to play them on the GameCube because I playing Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube. I try to use the C stick as if it's going to be change the camera angle while I'm walking around.
No,
it's painful.
There's a reason that Metroid Prime doesn't use the C stick to control the camera.
No, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But the idea of perspective, just thinking of current or the last 20 years of games, it's crazy because you like having Lakitu as a physical object. That doesn't appear in other games, but you still run into the same camera issues that existed in Mario 64, where you're like, why is the camera clipping into a wall and I can't see my character? Why is the camera clipping underneath the map? Like, what is happening? Yeah. So it's interesting that is something. It almost still feels like there's a physical camera person, but in this instance now it's just you.
Yeah. Right. But at least with Mario 64, there's a canon reason.
Yeah, it's that's why. No excuses now for current games.
Unless you throw Lakitu in there.
Yeah. As a side note, I really love that they introduced Lakitu kind of early, and then you forget about him pretty fast. But then up in the castle tower, there's a room with a mirror.
Yeah,
and you walk up to it, and Lakitu's right there.
You're chilling. Oh yeah. That mirror room is so cool too because that's when if you didn't just jump into that wall randomly, which you might have, but if you looked in the mirror, you could see that there's a painting in the mirror that's missing on the wall, and it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can jump into the wall, and you can. And that's just really neat. The whole game is full of stuff like that. As far as perspective, I do want to touch on this before we get into that, though, is how well do you think... one of the things that I think was kind of lost in translation from the 2D Mario game to the 3D, especially Mario 64, is in a 2D Mario game, Super Mario World, for example, when you're playing through that, if you're on top of a row of blocks, you can see what's underneath that row of blocks usually. The same can be said in a 3D and should be said in a 3D setting. So it's very interesting to have to think about the limitations of what your camera can show you in a 3D space and versus a 2D space, and what that then should dictate how a level should be designed. Because we have seen there were other 3D games at the time that were pretty popular, but they didn't follow the same format as Super Mario 64, which is really more of a, like I said, sandboxy, collectathon style game. You had Crash Bandicoot, which was huge, and that was really more of each level getting from the beginning to the end. And yeah, there were things to collect along the way, but it was really more about getting from point A to point B. And there were more levels, but they were shorter and really more streamlined, I think. And then
linear.
Yeah, they were very linear. Yeah. So it's just very interesting how they had to adapt what they could adapt from Super Mario and all of its previous forms into the new one, and then what had to change. Because prior to that, the star was just a power up that got you through some difficult spots and made you invincible for a little while.
Yeah.
But after Mario 64 came out, the star became iconic more as a collectible.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw that format expand a lot, into the whole genre of collectathon games that sort of existed parallel and overlapped with 3D platformers and eventually died out kind of in the GameCube era. I think one thing that you brought up was you can't see under yourself, and in the level design, I think it kind of shows. Very few areas in Mario 64 are constructed with mutually overlapping vertical areas. There are certainly some, but they tend to be pretty tricky parts of the game.
Frustrating, and not for the reasons I think they were intended.
Yeah, but you've got I'm just kind of like running through it. It's like the areas where you have overlapping vertical paths in like non-trivial ways. You've got basically nothing in the first section of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit in Wop's Fortress, but even there, it's kind of pyramid shaped,
Mm-hmm.
where you're kind of spiraling around something, but you're never like having a whole lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's like a couple of tricky areas, like in Shifting Sandland, you have the pyramid. In Lethal Lava Land, you have a volcano, where there's like the platforming kind of gets kind of confined to a more vertical area. And it isn't until you get to the later levels where you really start getting that vertical complexity. And now that I think about it, that was almost certainly intentional.
Yeah, I remember there's this one snow level, the second snow level I think that you go to, where there's kind of like a 3D maze.
Oh God, yeah.
But they made it like clear, so you could see through it the whole time.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way to do that.
Yeah. And they also gave you Vanish Cap, where it's like, yeah, just grab Vanish Cap.
Just go through it, yeah. You don't have to really do it, yeah. What are your favorite levels in the game? Joel, you want to start?
Ooh, okay. Let me actually look. I had to look up the level list of names just because there's so many. I was like, I honestly can't remember all of these.
Yeah.
But I do remember visually all of them. So my favorite one was Big Boo's Haunt, the haunted house. And the reason being, it was so out of left field compared to some of the other levels. I remember going in and going like, it's a haunted house? Like, what is this? And even from the get-go, you're like, okay, it's kind of creepy. You have like boos in the front, and they're like coming at you. Which is, you remember that from older side-scroller Marios, where you're like, oh yeah, if I look at them, they can't come get me. Okay. So the rules still apply.
Yeah.
But the part that I love and I remember so vividly is you walk into this room with a piano, and you're just kind of like chilling, doing whatever, and then all of a sudden, it opens up and there's like teeth and eyes, and it's like chomping, and you're like, oh, holy shit! I don't know why, but it just freaked me out as a kid playing it, because it was like, I didn't think it was this type of game where I was like, I'm actually scared of getting killed by this piano. Yeah. That's up there with the ice level where you can drop the penguin baby off the side of the map, and you knew you were a bad person if you did that.
Yeah.
But it was like, well, I have
could
to see if I can.
Because that's when you were a kid, yeah. Even as an adult. Can I do this? No, sure, let me do this.
And that's something that's kind of like sticks in my mind is like Nintendo. Like, it's funny because Nintendo has this very wholesome, like family-friendly image, but it was like, you can kill the baby penguin. Oh my god. No way! That's so mean.
Another little bit of darkness to that is there's 2 baby penguins in that level. If you bring the wrong one, the mom will be, that's not my kid.
It's like, oh my gosh.
Okay, I guess I should just leave this one wandering alone in the cold.
Yeah. But those 2 for sure are up there for me. And then also, like I said, the very first level. Like, Nintendo is really good at creating a first level with Mario that just, it's instant. Like, it comes back to you. Whether it's because it's the first thing you play, or you play it multiple times because you're getting used to the game. That image is just, like, burned into my head in terms of my gaming memories. Like, it's up there in the top 10 of, oh yeah, I remember the first time I played, and I got to the bomb at the top, and like you can just feel it. Like, I can remember seeing it as a kid on like the old CRT like TVs. Oh, yeah. So those ones for me, I think, are like the 3 special levels.
Yeah, for me, let's see. I actually have to. One of them has to go to the castle slide.
Oh, that's a good one.
The first secret, or Peach's slide. I mean, I definitely did that so much, trying to like improve my time and go faster, and like finally getting that 2nd star. Just because I enjoyed doing the level. And then later finding out that you can just cheese it by jumping off.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot about that.
But you can also do that in this is kind of a diatribe, but in Mario Kart 64. You can do that on Rainbow Road.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, it's very hard.
My old roommate used to do that when we would play, and I would just tell him, I'm not playing this with you.
He's just gonna do that every time.
This isn't fun. Like, I'm not learning that to beat you.
Just to beat you. Yeah.
Like, I'm not
Just
doing
to be
that.
on some kind of even. What else?
Let's see. Shifting Sandland
Oh, yeah.
also is just a really fun one. I like going into the pyramid. I like the kind of puzzle in order to get it. I definitely died there a lot, though.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun. And then maybe one other. I actually really enjoyed Hazy Maze Cave, which just kind of felt like a fun adventure.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a big area to explore when you finally get down and see Nessie, and you're like, oh my god, this is quite the secret. I definitely enjoyed finding some of the other levels more, but I think those were the ones that I enjoyed playing the most.
That's a really good distinction to make because like most of the levels, I would argue, it's not just the level itself, but it's discovering the level. Like we were talking about, in the clock or Peach's Slide. It's one of the two glass stained windows in that otherwise empty room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like what am I even supposed to do in here? Oh, okay, I can go in here.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember because at that time it was very different in terms of finding the information you needed to complete a video game. Like,
that's gonna be something.
Okay, I won't jump the gun then, but just totally made me think of that. It's like, man, how did I even remember, or how did I know to go into these places? It must have just been word of mouth.
Exactly.
My friend, he did it. I don't know.
That's something we really like to talk about with these retro games too. Is like that schoolyard talking aspect of it. If I could before then though, a few of my favorites. Definitely Hazy Maze Cave. When I was a kid, was like super up there for me.
Fist bump.
Although when I was playing it this time, I really enjoyed getting the first star, which is getting to Nessie.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, because one of my least favorite stars in the entire game is when you're on the little moving platform trying to collect the red coins.
God, yeah.
And it's like the second star of that level.
Yeah, that's
and I was like, this sucks. Like, it sucks so bad. Especially with those controls. It's like, they were great for the time, but like they're not optimal.
Yeah.
Another thing to say about that is like they're a little bit tanky. Like you can't just turn on a dime. Like if you're facing one way, you have to he doesn't just pivot. You have to like actually steer him around a little bit.
Yeah, and when you're on those really small platforms, you feel it.
You're trying to get on the arrows in the right times and everything, and then every little hiccup like shakes you off. Yeah. So that was tough. I think mechanically that level is not my favorite, but aesthetically it is. I really enjoyed finding Nessie, both my first time playing through it and then every subsequent time, including this last playthrough, which I did this week. I really enjoyed looking for it because I couldn't quite remember because it is a maze.
Right.
Like even as an adult, I'm like, I know there's like a really quick path, and eventually I found it after dying a couple of times. I'm like, let me just go this way, and I found it within like a minute. I was like, oh, that's nice. But Hazy Maze Cave aesthetically, the Shifting Sandland, stage 8 was always kind of one of my sort of favorites. Playing it through it this time, I'm like, okay, this was really cool. I really enjoy the aesthetic. I really enjoy the music. It's very like deserty, like mystical. Again, I really like the fact that even though you can see the boundaries still of the level, it also does feel like the desert itself kind of extends beyond there, which is really nice. The blocks on the little stone maze through the quicksand is an aesthetic that has stuck with me throughout life, and being able to like time it right so that when the block covers you, you're like in the little concave section of it.
Dude, they're jerks.
Yeah.
They will kill the hell out of you.
And then I guess if I were to choose a third favorite, I will want to talk a little bit more later about Bob-omb's Battlefield. But TikTok Clock is probably my ultimate favorite level from when I was a kid. I really like the fact that if you go in at the right time, you can either reverse the way things are moving or stop them entirely. Just that kind of thing that I don't think anyone told me about that. There were a lot of things in this game where as a kid I was told about, but that was something that I just stumbled upon. And I think the first time it happened to me, I thought that I'd broken the game somehow. And I ended to talk to someone like, I don't know how it happened, but the time stopped in there. And they're like, yeah, that's something you can do if you do it this way. What? So I thought that was really a really fun time.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember was it Tall Mountain? Is that the one where there's the monkey who could steal your hat?
Yes.
I, for whatever reason, I thought that once that happened, you could never get your hat back. So I just kept playing, and I never got my hat back. My first time playing through.
Oh.
So I don't remember. Do you get it back by default when you leave the world? Or I could have sworn I left and I didn't have my hat still.
I think he can.
I think you can just lose your hat if you don't go and get it back.
Yeah.
So
There's like a few places you can go to get your hat back.
Okay.
I think it might depend on where you lost it, because you can also lose it if a strong wind blows it off of you.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it back, you just walk. I don't know if there's like a detriment to walking around with that hat.
I don't think so.
Maybe you take more damage.
I think you take more damage.
Yeah.
Oh
okay.
really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't even know that. I just
It's
remember
such a weird thing to put in there.
Yeah.
it was so out of, and I just remember being devastated as a kid. I was like, I lost Mario's hat. Like,
That's iconic. I'm the one who lost that.
I did this.
I think you may be able to reset the game. Like, you just restart.
Okay.
I think you may get it back.
He gets it. Okay.
Maybe don't quote me.
Don't go. No, I managed not to lose my hat in this most recent playthrough.
Nice.
So I can't remember exactly.
It's only like a couple of places where it can happen. I believe the vulture can steal it.
The vulture can take
Sandland. It. Yeah. But it's only a couple of spots. Oh, while we're talking about favorite levels, least favorite levels.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Submarine level, whose name is escaping me.
That would be.
It's not Rusty
Dire Docks.
Dire Docks. It's not Rusty Bucket Bay. That's from Banjo-Kazooie.
Yes, that's a good one though.
Dire Docks. It's long. There's really nothing going on there. It's 2 rooms filled with water, and one has a submarine that goes away after the first star.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not interesting.
For how many levels there are in the game that are water levels, which off the top of my head I can think of 4 right away out of the 15 stages that are listed.
What's the 4th?
Okay, the 4th one would be like a bonus stage. It'd be the one.
Oh yeah, the one in the aquarium.
Yeah, the aquarium
Okay,
one. Yeah. Okay, so let me think. So there's the aquarium as a bonus. Then there's the level that it's attached to.
Jolly Roger Bay.
Jolly Roger Bay. There's the Dire Docks.
And then there's Wet Dry World.
Wet Dry World, yeah, and that's the one where you can raise the water level, yeah. Well, I think of those 3 actual levels, Wet Dry World is my favorite, just because you can drain the water and do it another way.
Be gone.
Be gone. But for as many levels that were like based around swimming, you'd think that it would be a little bit more fun to do. But it's really such a snail's pace the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, like Jolly Roger Bay has. Like, it's the first water level, so you're a little bit more interested in it, and like there's some stuff down there, kinda. In Dire Docks, it's just like there's just not much there.
The whole thing is just to get you, like it's sort of like a framing device, because it stands in the way of getting to Bowser's 2nd level.
Yeah,
and you have to board his submarine, I guess, to get to the Bowser level.
It's honestly not even that hard. It's just
boring. Yeah. What's your least favorite level?
Actually, Wet Dry World.
Wet Dry World. Oh.
And I think if I played it now, I might have a different opinion. But I just remember being really frustrated with it as a kid, and I think it was just maybe I just wasn't good at the puzzle of changing the water level, and like for whatever reason, I just remember not liking that level.
I still had a tough time with it as an adult.
I also didn't like the water bug things. I just like
they suck.
I just didn't. They're just annoying. They
Yeah.
just get in your way and like attack you, and it's just like. But that one, so I don't actually have super vivid memories of the other ones of Jolly Roger Bay. I remember a submarine.
That's
Dire Docks. Sorry, Dire Docks.
Yeah, Jolly Roger Bay has it's got like a galleon with that kind of goes back and forth.
Oh, okay.
The ship that you have to.
Yeah.
And the first star is sunken, and then
Yeah. Okay.
you raise it in the 2nd star.
Yeah. Just speaking from what I do remember, I just remember not liking Wet Dry World. that much.
Somebody at Nintendo for a while was like really pushing for those changing water levels in a level.
A lot of games, yeah.
A lot of games.
Doesn't
Like,
Ocarina of Time
Water
do it?
temple.
I remember that very vividly. Like, oh.
like, no, it's a good idea. We just need to implement it right.
No, clearly somebody came up with the tech, and they're like, we have to put this in every game.
All
It's
right.
not even that good. Yeah, but we spent 3 years on it.
We've developed water. Now what do we do with
And
it?
we can move it.
We can move it.
Some engineer
Do
is like,
nothing with
look,
it.
as I change the slider, it goes up and down.
Wow. This is a really good level for engineers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is worth saying, too, just about water levels in general. Like, there's a lot of levels in Mario where you can fall into the abyss and die instantly. It's far more anxiety-inducing for me to deal with, like, a ticking down water meter.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like that you can refill it just as easily as finding a coin or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's a weird juxtaposition because it's always such an anxious feeling being underwater as Mario.
Yeah.
But in all those water levels, you also get some of the chillest music of the entire game.
Oh man, dude.
So like it's like this like super calm feeling. But I just want to like hover like on the surface, so I'm like safe. And even if I take damage, I'll just heal it right away.
Yeah.
And just listen to the music.
Soundtrack wise, I would say yes. Music, top tier for water levels, but everything else about it, and they have to have some kind of redeeming quality.
Mm-hmm.
So at least they had some music in there that sounded peaceful and chill while you're suffering.
But 3 out of that's 1/5 of the levels.
Yeah.
We're
Crazy.
basically water based.
So, what about you, John? What was your least favorite level?
Least favorite level. Let me think about that for a second. Honestly, Rainbow Ride, I think.
It was a pain in the ass.
It was a pain in the ass. I remember thinking it was really cool as a kid because it was like just this whole thing in the sky, and it was like this big open thing with just like a bunch of platforms and stuff. But going into it as an adult, I'm like, maybe I've lost my sense of wonder, but I'm just like, this is just chaos. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why is this there, and then a floating ship over here, and then magic carpet ride, and it follows the rainbow, and
It is kind of insane.
It's
and you
just-
really look at it now, it's like
it's really like they took all like it's the last level of the game that isn't a Bowser level, and it's almost like they took all of the ideas that they had that they didn't know what to do anything with, and they're like, let's just put them all in the sky.
They just pulled out all the stops. They're just like, no limits. Just come up with the weirdest area. It's just in the sky. There's like boats floating around. There's magic carpets. There's a flippin' castle.
And for that, I will say they had some of the neatest platforming because of that. But I just think that like there's not as much in it to draw me into the little picture, the little painting of itself.
You know, the funny thing is, going back as an adult and playing that level, I think I collected 1 or 2 stars there before I was like, you know what, there are easier stars for me to get to 70. Honestly, like, yes, I could go, like, there's a couple there that are, like, pretty straightforward, where it's like, okay, yeah, you know, you get to the maze, you do the thing, you get the coin, or, like, you follow the magic carpets all the way to the end of the castle, you get the star. And then you get to the rest of them, it's just like, nah, no, I'm not doing that.
Right, and it's like, there's something to be said about, like, oh, it's not like I don't want to challenge myself, it's more like that challenge itself is ludicrous. It's like, I could get all the way to the end of this magic carpet ride and then slip up once, and then there's nothing to catch me underneath. And I guess that's kind of a part of the point.
Yeah.
But with as not so tight as the controls were pretty tight for the time, but again, like in retrospect, for as loose as the controls could be at times, it seemed like a really poor choice.
Well, let's actually talk about that. Like,
Yes.
Mario games are infamous for their like instant death pits, and you know this is coming back from the original Mario, or not the original Mario. I don't think it actually had a pit, but you know.
Well, there were pits in the levels.
Oh,
well, in the SES.
Oh, like the Mario Rose in the tunnel?
Yeah.
But that's
different.
Pre-platformer Mario.
Yeah, but you know, kind of instant death pits have always been a fixture in Mario games.
True.
And I think with the levels getting longer and without checkpoints in the 3D games, the instant death could get very frustrating.
Starting from the beginning every time. And that's another really good thing about the first level is there aren't any pitfalls.
Yep.
Like you have that entire level to play around with, and you can't fall to your death.
Yeah.
I mean, you can if you are low enough on health and you fall from the top of the mountain. Sure,
Yeah.
But.
Well, and like it in the first levels as well, stuff like Cool Mountain, it's fairly hard to fall off the edge. Like there's one section with a gondola where it's like, okay, you might be able to fall off, but otherwise, just like a Thwomp's Fortress, you have to basically jump off the edge of the floating island and die.
And it's possible, and it teaches you that way. Like, this is a thing. When you get into later levels, you have to be more careful. But for now, you just know that it's a thing.
Yeah. But then eventually you get to Rainbow Ride, and it's like,
this is too much.
Any mistake, and you just die instantly, and have to start over from the end. And it's like, could there be... I really like more modern takes where it's like, let's take you back to, like, a previous spot where you were and maybe give you another shot.
So that's why I like TikTok, because there were a lot of times I fell from near the top of that and then ended up landing on something halfway down.
Sure.
It's like, okay, well, at least I can pick it up from here.
Yeah.
You were about to say something, Bill, Joel.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that design is just a product of the time? Or do you think it was, like there's the old saying, like Nintendo hard, right? Like the games they made on NES, they were brutal. Like if you played Ninja Gaiden, it's insanity. I played it as an adult, and it's like, how on earth, I can't beat it. I can't beat it. So do you think it was just a product of the time, like Nintendo had this mentality of, you got to be good to beat this, or was it a technical limitation with it being a new space for them to be playing with, and they just didn't even think, like, hey, do you think it's a bad idea to not have some kind of checkpoint or like a restart area for people if they mess up here?
Yeah.
I think there's a little of both.
I'd agree.
I think that they just weren't sure how much, again, of the classic Mario formula they could translate into 3D. Whereas when you're only thinking about 2 dimensions, those kinds of pitfalls and tight platforming work a lot better. You could jump from single pillar or single column to single column and only have to worry about left and right. And that works a little bit easier than if you're doing so and having to worry about all axes.
Yeah.
I also think, though, that it is also the last level. And like you said, you only need 70 out of, I think, 120 stars. You could avoid that level entirely. So it's almost like the game's version of hard mode is entirely put into that last level. So it's like you could avoid it if you want, or if you want, you could just go for it and really test yourself.
Yeah.
I just don't think that they gave you the tools to do it as well as they were hoping they could have.
Yeah, I agree. And also to go back to, like, did things translate into 3D Mario? There's some other stuff in there as well, like the presence of lives. Like, if you go to one of the previous Mario games, lives are important because if you lose all your lives, you, like, hard reset and have to start from the very beginning of the game. As though you powered off the console and turned it back on because they didn't have saves. And, that was also kind of a holdover from arcade games. With games like that were on the N64, that wasn't a problem anymore. The cartridges had, saves. And the lives at this point became completely superfluous. If you game over, you just start from outside Peach's castle again, and it would take 30 seconds to get back to the level that you were working on.
It's still a slight pain in the ass. It's kind of a walk of shame.
Yeah, I definitely turned off the console a few times when I game over.
I don't want to walk inside again.
But it was clear that they brought along some unnecessary mechanics, and I do wonder, if you fell off and just got put back to, a checkpoint, would that really make the game easier, or would it just make it less tedious?
I think the latter.
Yeah.
Probably. What do you think, Joel? Do you think it's just a product of the times, or?
I think it is. I think as time went on and they kept making more and more 3D games, and just games in general, I think they got a better idea of, and I think this comes down to just their business in general, is they probably started getting more feedback from people, however they took that feedback, whether it was online or people sending in letters, whatever. I think they kind of realized we don't need to make it artificially difficult for people to like our games. It's not just about a challenge. It's about an enjoyment of being able to play a game. And I've noticed that the older I've gotten with games, it used to be about, hey, I've got so much free time. I'm in, middle school, high school, whatever. I'm going to play it on the hardest difficulty.
Right.
I'm going to achieve this. And then you beat it and you're like, I feel good. You pat yourself on the back and you go on with your day.
Yeah.
Now I'm at the point where it's like, there's so many things going on. There's so many responsibilities. I don't need to play it on the hardest.
Right.
I want a little bit of a challenge. I don't want to walk through this or breeze through it. And you see that with the newer titles, right? The newer Mario titles, where there's like, literally, I think it's I forget what, it's some power up. If you've died too many times,
have
you seen this?
Easier, yeah.
Well, they give you this like invincibility power up.
Yeah.
And so you can just like sprint through the level.
Yeah.
Which I think is cool if it as an option for people, where it's like, and this is clearly for maybe younger kids,
yeah.
And they've died like 9 million times. It'd be like us playing Ninja Gaiden back when it came out as, elementary or middle schoolers going, is this designed for me? Because,
right.
like I can't even make it past the first level. Like,
yeah.
So I think it is just a product of its time and a product of their business and learning and getting feedback from people.
Yeah.
And growing.
Yeah, I think interestingly, Mario specifically was particularly conservative in its design.
Mm-hmm.
I think it may not have been until Odyssey that they got rid of lives. They kept them for a long, long time, even though they were basically not relevant.
Yeah.
Even though like Banjo-Kazooie doesn't have lives.
Yeah.
I think 3D World still has lives too.
Yeah.
So I think Odyssey is the first one that
just did away with them.
Did away with them. They're like, you know what? Nobody cares about these anyway.
Well, because like part of it is just like the green mushroom is like iconic.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. So what do you do with that now? That's a good point.
That's a great point. Yeah. It's like they were like, we need to have that in there, but it's not really going to do anything. But just keep it in there. Just throw it in there.
And you can't have it do something else either. That's the one-up mushroom.
Yeah, they've established their lore. They've established the rules of the Mario universe. It has to be a level up.
But at this point, it's outstayed the regular mushroom.
Exactly.
Because there are no regular mushrooms in the 3D Mario games. I don't think, except for in 3D World or 3D Land. But there's no regular red mushroom in 64.
Yeah, because the power ups of the power ups from the previous games have been replaced by the caps.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow, that's a good point. I forgot about that.
It's just interesting. It's like, well, this one we held on to.
Yeah.
I think again, it's because they weren't sure that they didn't need the life system anymore in N64, so that held on a little longer. It became a series staple in a way that the red mushroom didn't remain quite so much, perhaps. And I think maybe because of that, it just became cemented into the lore.
Yeah, I think one big problem with the red mushroom is that, like, in, say, Super Mario World, like Big Mario versus Small Mario, because it's tile-based, it's you really feel it when you're one tile tall versus two tiles tall. In 3D, you don't know how tall you are. I think Mario can crawl. I think I never used that except by accident.
We'll talk about why in a minute, but
but like, there's a reason that there aren't height puzzles in that, and it's because you can't tell when it's in 3D. If there were these things where it's like, oh, you have to be small to fit in here, there are other games that do that, but they need all of this signaling to be like, this is a very small hole and you can't fit in it. You look at like in Ocarina of Time, if you as an adult Link go up to a tunnel and hit A, Navi will come out and be like, hey, you're too big. You can't fit in here. And that's because I couldn't really communicate it visually. Or I think some other games which did have mechanics like that would shrink the hole way, way small to be like, no, really, you gotta be small. So that like size mechanic, they just couldn't. It didn't translate.
I mean, the one place where I guess you could argue it kind of did, and mechanically it was very different, would be in Tiny Huge Island.
Oh,
yeah. But that's like, you're either way bigger compared to everything than you normally are, or way smaller compared to everything than you normally are.
I forgot about that. They've got like tiny hole if you can't fit through something, or.
Could you imagine though if like every time you tried to do something that you clearly weren't supposed to do in Super Mario 64, like you had Peach in your ear like, Mario, what are you trying to do? You're way too big to fit in there. And
that would really cramp your style.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is Mario 64, all Mario games aim for a little bit more simplicity. Mm-hmm. Like you're saying, you don't want to have to telegraph so much.
Yeah,
in those games because you really want to be able to just pick up and go.
Yeah, the platformer in general, I think, really does try to make you get into that state of flow where you are constantly moving and constantly, coming up onto challenges and overcoming them and moving past them. And if you have stuff like that, like what you get in adventure games, it's going to break up that experience and it's going to make it feel a lot worse.
Mm-hmm. Which is why there's not as much like dialogue at all in there.
Mm-hmm. And why there's basically no story in the game.
Yeah, because you don't really need it. The narrative is you're climbing the castle.
Right.
Like that's the story.
I mean, God, could you imagine that every new level that you got to, you had to sit through like a 5-minute cutscene of people talking to each other?
Kojima directed Mario. Hour-long cutscene after you complete the first level.
Like, that was a great start.
I mean, a lot of modern games do that.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, Odyssey kind of has that.
Oh, yeah.
But Odyssey is also very big, much bigger than 64.
I actually disagree.
I mean, like, the individual levels are a little... I guess you can say what you're saying. But there is a lot more, like, dialogue and, like, characters to talk to and stuff like that.
And even then, like, Odyssey is pretty minimalistic when it comes to its story.
That's true. But like, there is more than 64.
Certainly. 64 is like, dude, Peach has been kidnapped. Yes.
Mario, you want that cake? You better go save it.
Do you feel though that in 64 that was something that was missing? Having it, because there was times that it did feel kind of just empty.
I agree.
Like, even though there's all these different worlds and stuff that you're going into, other than like some random characters like the penguin and stuff, there's not a lot in there. It's kind of like everyone's bad in these levels. Either bypass them or kill them and get the stars and get out. Like, and outside in terms of the hub world, not really anyone to talk to. There's like Toad, like in the corner sometimes.
A couple bunnies,
and that's it.
Around.
Yeah, it's like, and so, and I don't have experience with Odyssey, Sunshine. What did you prefer? You played both of those. Did you prefer having a few more characters with a little bit of dialogue, or did you like the 64 formula?
I really like the 64 formula for that setting because the fact that Peach's castle had become deserted, I think, sort of it made it feel like you're exploring someone's giant home when they weren't there, which was sort of a part of that magic of exploring and finding secrets in Peach's castle. It wouldn't have felt quite the same if there were just toads literally all over. I guess there is like a toad in every room, but they fade out if you're not like right up next to them. So you could argue that they're not even really there. Yeah, it's not like there's people populating the castle. So it did add to that kind of mystery and versus something I really liked about Sunshine going in the other direction is that it's like an island, like a tropical island resort area. And
Delfino Plaza is just bursting with life.
Yeah, and that has its own charm.
Yeah,
and that works better for that setting of like an island paradise.
Yeah, overall, I think one thing that makes the castle stand out is that it feels a little bit more like an adventure. Delfino Plaza feels a little arbitrary.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, wait, why does this place take me to this other place? The castle completely does away with it. It's just like, dude, it's magical. However, it's also, the castle is kind of interconnected. It's not much. It's not Dark Souls. But like, for example, in the metal cap area, if you fall off the end of the cave, you actually pop out of the waterfall and fall down the castle moat.
I love that.
So the castle just kind of has its own charm as this like pretty elegant, just like single space. Now that said, I do think that once you have explored the castle and you've discovered the secrets, it begins to feel a little bit more like it's a level select screen still. But it's still pretty cool.
It's like everything up until you're backtracking.
Yeah.
Like once you're like, okay, now I have to go back. I'm going to go back to some earlier levels to get stars. and there's nothing more to discover along the way,
At the very
then it
least,
feels like a trek.
At the very least, it's a short distance.
Yeah. You're just like, okay, I gotta go up the stairs, through a couple of doors, and then I get to the level that I want.
Yeah.
At which point, I kind of wish that you could sort of fast travel to locations you've been to before, but I guess there are a couple of secrets where if you don't know where they are already, it might take a couple of passes through the same area to realize, oh, the light's shining down from the sun in the lobby, or oh, there's these there are these two stone pillars that I need to ground pound and drain the water in the moat, and there's that level there.
Yeah. That also, there's kind of a pretty limited set of secrets. There's like maybe 4 or 5, and the game's kind of, shot its wad.
I think so. The Peaches Slide, the aquarium, then the flying cap level, the transparent cap level. Where do you get the metal cap?
It's in Hazy Maze Cave.
It's in Hazy Maze Cave. Okay,
yeah,
so
not really a secret.
So that's not really yet. Yeah, as far as like actual secret areas, I'd say you're right. Although I do think that there's a lot of little secrets hidden within the levels that are pretty cool.
Yeah, certainly.
I really like one of my favorite memories as a kid, and we were talking about like how information gets passed around.
Yes.
So this might be a good time to get into that.
Yeah.
Was we talk a lot about how like that schoolyard feeling, something that I'm not sure is really still happening anymore now that you have the internet. I mean, I guess it still happens. It just happens on
It's
forums.
a much larger schoolyard.
Yes.
It feels a little less personal, at least to me. That's
Yeah.
I mean,
We're also
we're also grown ups, so kids might just think that we're being old and stuff like that. But
okay, boomer.
Okay, boomer. In my day, we used to go out on the schoolyard, and I used to talk to my friend Jimmy, and he's the one who told me that if you go into Cool Mountain and you stand on the end of a bridge, it'll teleport you to the bottom of the map.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's totally how it was. You'd go over to Tommy's house, and he'd be playing, and he'd be like, oh yeah, if you do this, and be like, holy shit. And you go back to your game, it's like, oh my god, you can warp from the bottom of Cool Mountain to the top of Cool Mountain.
You didn't know you could do that? No, what? And then you go home immediately and try it.
Yeah.
It worked! And then, I don't know if you, like, some people will try to tell you some bogus rumors. Like,
oh, of course. I mean, well, I think we can't go through this entire thing without discussing like the Luigi rumors, where there are all these rumors. It's like if you get 120 stars, you do this and you do that, and you like walk around this pillar 7 times, and you sit on it, and then Luigi will come out of the mirror, and it's like a lot of the rumors from that time of like, oh, there's a super special thing. I think Mario 64 actually did a lot to kind of promote those because it did hide levels in some kind of wild areas. And I've got to say, like, some of those secret levels were really cool.
Yeah.
Like Shifting Sandland, where it's like, oh, this is like
hidden in a wall.
Well, and it's just like, oh, it's a dead end, okay. And then like you come back the second time because you're chasing the rabbit, and you like accidentally dive in, and it's like, holy crap, this is a level?
That was here the whole time?
Or Snowman Land, another one where it's like it takes a lot of effort in order to get into. Not a very good level, in my personal opinion, but it was discovering a secret and having the reward be a whole level instead of just like a star, or in a lot of other games like a random piece of whatever, is really, really cool. That's a hell of a reward for going around.
And you feel like a real genius.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, you found the painting in the mirror again.
Yeah. I mean, especially like Vanish Cap, you could pretty easily miss that.
Yeah. Yeah. Draining that moat. When I was a kid, I was like, wait, what? Like, then there's also like, there's this like barely legible text that's on the statue in the courtyard with all the booze in it. And there's like a rumor floating around that said L is real, as in Luigi is real, and that was like substantiating the rumor that Luigi was in the game.
Do you, so not Mario 64 related, but getting back to kind of rumors and stuff, I remember one of the playground rumors that I heard was with Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
With Red version. There's some weird thing where, like, remember the cruise ship?
We talked about this in that episode.
Yeah. So it totally just made me think, because that's some of the stuff that I heard growing up was like, oh yeah, if you do something with Mewtwo or something with the truck near the... Yeah, it's like all this weird stuff, and then there's ones about like putting your Game Boy in the microwave. And
I didn't hear about those.
This was one, so this is like early internet, and you could find weird stuff on like Pokemon secrets, and one of them was like if you have Mewtwo and you take Mewtwo to like the daycare or something, or like something really weird, and then you put your Game Boy in the microwave for 15 seconds with it on, it would hatch into Mew. It was like something crazy.
So the funny thing is that like cartridge tilt is real.
Okay.
So like physical effects on cartridges can actually affect like save data and game data.
Weird.
Like it's pretty well known that like if you tilt a game cartridge with certain game cartridges in certain ways, you can get kind of interesting glitches.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody at one point did that.
It was such an interesting period of gaming, maybe again because we were kids for it, but where anything seemed possible in these games.
Yeah, you had no idea.
Before we realized how much of them were really ones and zeros and a bunch of work and stuff like that, like it really did just feel like each of them was this magical little world, at least the good ones.
Yeah.
It was like anything you could do. Like I remember playing 3D like in Mario 64 and other games like it, like there were times where there's no star up in this spot. I just want to see if I can get there.
Yeah.
I just want to see if I can figure out. I know I'm not supposed to, but I want to see if I can figure out a way to get there.
It was kind of a refreshing time when you couldn't. Like there's a lot of games I play now where if I hit a wall and I'm there for like 20, 30 minutes, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to look this up. But it was, when you're younger, you're like, I've got time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of refreshing to go, like you said, maybe there's nothing there at the top of that mountain, but it seems like I can get there. So let's just see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot more, I feel like there's a lot more imagination and creativity because there wasn't, and there's pros and cons to this, but because there wasn't giant forums of walkthroughs, and you were kind of limited. This is something I loved, Nintendo Power.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you'd read those, like there's a section every issue, like weird secrets in these games. And like, that was your form of going on to Reddit or, any game forum and finding like, okay, how do I do this?
Yeah, you'd be like, what if I stand on top of all the pillars in shifting Sandland, the top of the pyramid will explode and there's a secret area in there?
Right.
What?
It was magical. And now it's like, if you subscribe to any game site and journalist site, right? Like IGN, Kotaku, and you subscribe to them on Facebook, it's like, you literally see walkthroughs for the brand new game, and it's like how to do this in this game, how to do this in this game, how to do this in this game. It's all there. It's instantly available, and for better or for worse, it did change how people approach games.
And like nowadays, like if there's a rumor of something, someone could just go into the game's code and be like, "That's not real."
Yeah.
Like there's nothing in the code to support that. Like,
yeah, the creator of Minecraft infamously was very frustrated by that at one point, where he's like, I can't even add secrets to this game anymore. Everybody will just decompile the game, figure it out within hours.
Yeah,
that is a sad thing.
Yeah, a little bit. And I think there were kind of two things that really led up to it. Is one, you mentioned, everybody had a whole bunch of time, and two, you're a kid. You don't have 200 games on your Steam list that you're like, I've been stuck in this game for 30 minutes. I'm just going to go play something else.
Yeah. You had that one game you spent your whole allowance on for the last 2 months.
Right, exactly.
You're not going to go grab another game.
Right, it's like, okay, I got 3 Nintendo 64 games for Christmas, and that's all I'm getting this year.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'm going to play them to death. If I can't actually beat the game, then I'm going to fuck around in it for a little while. Or I'm going to mess around with it.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, doing like Peach's Slide hundreds of times. That was just me being like, this is fun. I'm just going to keep doing this. And eventually, you get under, 18 seconds or whatever, you get an extra star. You're like, holy crap, this is great.
It's crazy. Like, you're just making me think about this. But in high school, one of those games that I did that with, I played like 9 times. Like, no exaggeration, was Dead Space.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this, the change in like, I wasn't working a full-time job, so that was a game I bought, like $60 brand new. I loved it. And it's that difference between, now, okay, you're making money, you're an adult, you're working, but your time has gone down.
Oh, yeah.
And so that shift is really interesting to look at and go, now I have access to almost infinite amounts of games.
Mm-hmm.
But my time has shrunk to just a fraction. And so now, at least for me, I find myself going, I need to make the absolute most of the time I have to play this right now. And I do miss that the ability to sit there and go, I've got a Saturday, I'm not doing anything, my friends are doing something, they're all busy, they're out of town. All right, I'm going to play video games for 8 hours today.
It's very rare that I get a chance to do that now.
Right.
And when I do, I cherish it.
And that's how you end up on the other end of the spectrum, where you're like playing Genshin, and you're like $50 for like 12 hours of fusion mats. Like, okay.
Okay. See my money. Okay. Oh yeah, and now you don't even have to go to a physical store anymore to get your games.
Yeah,
I miss that actually. I really miss that.
Sitting in a GameStop and like flipping through, like, look at all the used games, like, oh, what could I get if I trade in these games? Like,
I value what modern gaming has allowed with Steam, but I do miss going to a game store and midnight launch.
mm-hmm.
I mean, there's really no point anymore.
No.
Everything is released at 9 p.m. Pacific digitally,
right?
Because it's already out on the East Coast. Like, so midnight launches don't even exist now,
Right.
for the West Coast.
Right.
So it's like, it's just, the landscape has changed, and that's why it's so cool to look back at games like Mario 64.
Mm-hmm. So, Adrien, I know you had posted a couple of questions too that you wanted to get to. Do you want to start asking a couple of those?
Why do you think 3D platformers as a genre has largely faded away?
I think maybe it's really hard to compete with Mario.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they always kind of set industry standards every time they come out with a new 3D Mario game.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, they certainly haven't completely gone extinct outside of Mario. They've just become like... It's largely indie developers that are doing them these days. Then there's also like, even I was about to say Ukulele, but that's an indie game as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
to be fair, that's like a Banjo-Kazooie revival.
It's still a platformer 3D collectathon. It definitely falls more in that vein though. I don't know about. I think that we're really in a retro revival era right now, and the retro that's being revived right now is the 2D. More so than the 3D.
Metroid.
We got Metroidvanias all over the place. We have Shovel Knight. We have was kind of like a big one, Cave Story. Pretty much that whole like era of gaming that we're still in is kind of like trying to revive that pixel art stuff. I think that pixel art has been a very timeless thing, and for that reason, I think a lot of people who are creating games right now grew up more so playing those games. It's also easier, I'd imagine, than trying to account for building a whole 3D world.
Oh yeah.
That being said, they just released on Switch Smurfs 3D platformer game. Yeah. I haven't played it yet, but
I gotta get it.
Yeah, no, I kind of want to check it out.
I gotta get it.
It actually looks pretty solid. Like the at least it looks nice. Like the graphics look pretty neat.
If the game's like actually good, I'm gonna be like, God damn it! I have to play a freaking Smurfs.
Now I have to play a Smurfs game because there's nothing else right now. I think mostly it's just really hard to compete with Mario. They kind of hold one of the lead champs. Can you think of any, Joel, more recent?
Honestly, no. Well, Ukulele was one of those ones, but isn't that the old Banjo-Kazooie team even that actually decided they wanted to, people from it?
Part of
from
them.
Rare.
And it seems like, generally speaking, the 3D platformer is exclusive to a degree to Nintendo, and really they're pushing out Mario. And it's, what was the one on Switch, the Super Mario
Odyssey.
Odyssey, yeah. which I still need to play. And I don't know, maybe. And it seems like Sony has really dialed in on really, really high production single player action adventure games. God of War, Last of Us, games like that. And then Microsoft is interesting because they have some of that, but a lot of their stuff is also, at least when I think of Microsoft, I think of Call of Duty. Like they kind of have, and that's not all they have, obviously. They have a lot. But it's like Nintendo kind of has this niche space in the market, and they do it so well. And I think other developers kind of realize, hey, that's not our space. And which is sad because it's like I'm sure there's so much money that could be poured into creating really cool experiences.
Yeah. So I've actually got a different take there. I think the demise of the 3D platformer has more to do with like technical capabilities. Like there are definitely a lot of games that have like 3D platforming sections in them. But I think one of the main reasons that we saw this kind of renaissance, or can't be a renaissance if it wasn't a reinvention, but like all these 3D platformers in that like PS1 and 64 era was because the hardware suddenly could do this thing, and it couldn't do a lot else. There's reason like the first-person shooters were still not really there. There were a lot of types of games that they didn't really have the capabilities for yet, and 3D platformers were one thing that they really could do. And kind of, as you can see with Mario 64, kind of do everything you really would want to do with the technology that they had built.
That's a good point, because how much further could you push the 2D Mario format beyond where it was in Super Mario World?
I gotta see that as the definitive.
Yeah, as a thing. They've done the new they've been doing new Super Mario Bros. For like 2 decades now. Yeah,
but technically there's nothing
new about it.
That's groundbreaking at all.
If anything, and this might be my nostalgia talking, I would say that the aesthetic, the art style for Super Mario World was better than the new Super Mario.
I agree.
100%.
I agree.
I don't think that's nostalgia talking. I think
but if you had tried to do that graphical style on an N64, it would have. Like, what are you doing? Why are you even? Yeah. Why would you even? Do this?
There are more capabilities. You can do something else, and now that you could, I think one of the most basic things that you can do in a world that you can render is just kind of move around it. It's like, okay, you've got collision, you've got input, you got rendering, you can do a platformer. There's a reason that so many indie games are like side-scrolling platformers. It's because it's easy to do, it's easy to program relatively, and I think 3D platformers were kind of they didn't require as much of the console and from the developers who were still learning how to deal with this new thing that was 3D.
That's a good point. Yeah,
that's a good point.
And I really hope that we eventually get the indie revival of 3D platformers, because I'd love to revisit them.
Yeah, because if you look at the indie revival of 2D platformers has brought a lot of really great things to the genre.
Oh, absolutely. We've got any number of 3D platformers. What's the one with the bugs that we were talking about earlier?
Hollow Knight?
Hollow Knight, yeah. What an amazing game that has come out of a decades-old genre just recently.
That game, I'm excited to eventually do an episode on that, because that's the game that really got me into the Metroidvania genre of gaming. So, it's interesting to see, what will the people who grew up playing 64 or Sunshine or even Odyssey eventually, what are they going to come up with when they start doing these games?
Yeah. Well, if anybody wants to make a spiritual successor to Space Station Silicon Valley, I am here to support your GoFundMe or whatever.
And I've actually been playing through that one too, and I'm really enjoying it so far.
We got to do an episode of that.
We're going to do that one for sure.
Man.
I'm actually in the dark. What is that game?
So it's an obscure game by Rockstar.
Oh, okay.
It's a 3D platformer on the N64, and it's like this weird the core mechanic is that you're a like little robot who's like this little microchip, and you can jump into robotic animals. Like you're just kind of dropped into the middle of these levels with that are populated by robotic animals. You kind of have to figure out how to get to the end, and you do it by like killing and taking over animals and solving puzzles. It's a really weird game.
I actually would love to try that. That sounds super unique.
It's really, really cool.
Okay.
The only game that I've seen that actually uses those mechanics a little bit are Mario Odyssey of all things, where you can like capture enemies with your hat and like play as them.
Oh, okay.
It definitely, in playing through it after you recommended Space Station Silicon Valley, it does feel like kind of a precursor to that in a lot of ways. And another one of my favorites right now, actually probably my all-time favorite game currently, Bug Fables, is a spiritual successor made by people who really loved the original two Paper Mario games. So it's like two of my favorite games, Hollow Knight and Bug Fables, are indie developed games made by people who grew up playing games that I grew up playing, but were like, you know what, I bet I could do this a little bit better, and to me that speaks to one of the key things about video games that signifies it. Like, of course we know by now, video games are art. And one of the big markings of that is that it's changed over time, and that the people who grew up experiencing games are now creating games and evolving the medium, and more than just graphical and processing power, but just in pure ideas, like what works. Even if you have a very limited scope of what you can do, what works within that scope.
Yeah. So speaking of ideas that have that have kind of stayed around a lot, what do you think about the success of the action scheme from Mario 64, where you have, as actions, you have jump, duck, and punch, and everything that, like every action that isn't running in that game is some variation on those combinations of buttons.
I want to hear about why you use duck.
Oh,
that's the first thing that came to mind. You alluded to this. I need to know.
So duck, and more so the crawl.
Okay,
I used the crawl a lot, and that was mostly because, and there's another question that I wanted to ask, but this kind of ties in a little bit also, is what is like your least favorite mechanic in the game for Super Mario 64? To me, it was anytime that you have like a crookedy, narrow bridge that you need to cross, and it's like the control stick is, even for as accurate as you could say it was for the time, it is in no way prepared for something like that. Like, even if it was a straight shot, which most of the time it isn't in those situations, like in Big Tiny Big Island, there's one that's kind of like that. That where you go into the Red Coin Cavern. It's like you're kind of. That's when I would crawl. I would literally crawl across the entire way because I can't move slow enough otherwise and accurately enough. So it was a pain in the ass. It wasn't oh, this is a chance to use the crawl. It was like well, at least I have the crawl. I don't like doing it because it's slow and it brings the game down to a halt, but it's like I don't really have any recourse here. Because I've fallen off this thing 12 times and I'm not doing it a 14th.
Yeah, so. The funny thing is that even speedrunners will talk about, like, sometimes the angle on the joystick it's just off.
Yeah.
They'll just be like, oh yeah, in order for this trick I needed a really precise angle and the controller didn't give it to me.
Mm-hmm. It's an 8-point axis, right? Or is it?
No, it's entirely.
It's the whole.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there are notches.
Yeah.
Where it'll kind of stick to a particular cardinal direction.
Right. Okay.
But the reading of it wasn't always super accurate, just because it was just it's kind of archaic for modern time.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's like trying to tell time on a sundial. Like, it's there, but especially if you've been using a wristwatch your entire life.
Right.
You're like, I don't know.
I just remember generally thinking about the mechanics. Whenever I try to punch anything, I would usually get hit because I would miss the punch, and you just the momentum would send you forward. You miss the punch, and then you get hit.
Yeah.
So I just jumped on everything.
I never used punches for attacks, only to break blocks, pretty much.
Yeah. I always felt it was a little bit funny that there was the attack button, which you largely didn't use. There is, you had, remember the trip? The trip, if you crouch and hit the B button, you do, this little trip thing.
But it's not like you could sweep something and trip.
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And there's like really no reason to use it.
I can't think of a single place where it would make more sense to use that over something else.
Like I think for dealing damage, it was just jump on it,
Yeah.
ground pound it.
Mm-hmm.
If that didn't work, or maybe do a dive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would like at the hands, with the eyes, in the pyramid.
Yeah.
I would dive at those.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't try to run up them, stop, and then punch.
Yeah.
And the punches have a 3-hit combo, I think.
Yeah, they do.
Like, what?
Right, like what enemy actually requires that? And I mean, I think a lot of it was making the controls feel natural, where it was like, okay, here is an attack button. There needs to be an attack variation for every permutation that Mario can be in.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that makes sense too, where it's like, if you're suddenly given more control of Mario than ever, and if they're expecting you to be so immersed into the game that if an enemy sneaks up on you, you yourself would want to punch it, and you don't have any way to make Mario do that. Like, I guess that there would be some sort of a disconnect there. It could potentially pull you out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that once you start to think of it as a game, something to be figured out and accomplished, you quickly realize it's not a very usable mechanic.
I think there's a reason that the trick doesn't appear in later games.
It's a cool breakdance move.
That is true.
But,
That is true.
It's in Smash Bros.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is in Smash Bros.
It's exactly like that.
Because
in
it
Smash
works
Bros.
in Smash Bros.
It works very well in Smash Bros.
It'd probably work in other 2D Mario titles.
Probably, yeah.
You know, what I also find funny is that a lot of those controls have made their way into things like Mario Party and some of the other spin-offs where it's like, oh yeah, you've got the duck, you've got the ground pound, you've got like the attack, you've got the dive.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just a very successful control scheme.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I think you're right. It inspired a lot of the games that came after it in Nintendo's catalog.
Mm-hmm.
At least if Mario was involved.
Yeah.
What about that long jump, though?
Oh man, we could probably talk about the long jump for
a while.
10 minutes.
Like, the fact...
Go ahead.
It's so interesting how much accuracy I was able to get out of that, even in my most recent playthrough. Like, sometimes the jumps themselves, not so much. Sometimes, the crouch jump, the triple jump was super unreliable. But anytime I needed that long jump, it was clutch. And you could stop it. You didn't have to go all the way with it. You could,
you had a lot of in-air control
it.
over Mario while he was long jumping.
I think it was the most control I felt like I had over Mario was when I was long jumping, which is an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, which is especially funny because the long jump is also the source of one of the most infamous bugs in Mario 64.
Oh, tell me about that.
So that's it turns out that all of that control over Mario's long jump can be used to break the game, where you can actually long jump backwards. And because the game's code doesn't have anything that limits his backwards momentum, you can build up a whole bunch of momentum, and you can use it to clip through walls. You can actually use it to get into the final Bowser stairs
That's
early.
the secret.
Yeah.
I've never been able to do it. I knew there was a way to move backwards with him, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I was trying that.
Yeah, it's manipulating backward long jumps. I'm not an expert, so I couldn't tell you how to execute it, but it does involve building up momentum. Usually against a wall of some sort where you keep jumping backwards against it until you build up so much velocity that you just clip through the wall.
I've seen videos of that, but I never understood what was happening. Old speedrunning videos and stuff.
Yeah.
And I always thought, they're just like hacking the game or something. No, it's like that's just the game being.
That's just how
they didn't double check that.
Yeah.
Which
that's very common in games. Is like non-standard movement often doesn't have velocity limits, and if you can somehow perform it a lot or in unexpected situations, you can end up going a lot faster than you expect.
It's such an interesting thing. It's a problem that I think is kind of unique to gaming. I mean, it does exist in some other mediums, but I think more so in gaming than anywhere else. Whereas, like, in a book, you can only really read the book from left to, in English, per se, from left to right.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're a game, maybe you have, a team of 6 people who are testing your game, but that's nowhere near the sample group of the people who are actually going to play it, especially now, where it's like you can have those 6 people play the crap out of that game and never realized that momentum moving backwards thing was possible because for some reason that group of 6 people would have never thought to try it.
Right.
But suddenly you publish it and people are, like, you have thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people playing it, and they're figuring that stuff out in a single day.
Right. And I mean, with the novel, somebody will eventually figure out that your proofreader missed that you spelled the THE at one point, and some readers will notice it and be like, oh, all right, and keep going. In a video game, the fact that you did the metaphorical equivalent of spell the wrong means that now you have infinite long jumping speedrunners 30 years later can use to break the hell out of your game.
So funny.
And at the time too, I mean, I guess it can still happen, but now patches changed everything. I mean, biggest example of this in terms of the series that I've seen, original Super Smash Bros. And Melee. Mm-hmm. There's stuff in Melee that was clearly never intended to exist with wave dashing. Mm-hmm. Future installments, once Brawl hit, there was internet. Oh, okay, stuff can be tweaked a little more. But then really in Smash 4 was when you started to see, if you were a competitive player, you had to be not only up to date with all the characters and their moves, you had to know the patch schedule and which characters have been altered to the point of, oh, this isn't even viable anymore. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a weird, it's like on the one hand, great, you want to balance the game. On the other, you lose out on some of that cool, weird stuff like infinite momentum traveling backwards. Like, because you imagine, like, if that was released today, they would have patched the shit out of it.
Right.
Just not even because it's like, we don't want you to speedrun, just because they're like, oops, that was unintended.
Yeah, that was bad. Well, the funny thing was even back in the N64 days, there were new builds of the games. Yeah. So, like, oftentimes Japan would have the View 1.0, the US would have, like, the 1.1, and then there would probably be one for EU that might be even a little bit later. There might be re-releases.
Yeah.
So even now, like, the version of even N64 games is important. And, like, if you're doing speedruns or if you're doing emulation, oftentimes it's like, oh, well, you need to have this particular build of the game. And, like, the Japanese version of Mario 64 has some extra glitches in it.
Huh. That's cool. I wonder if this is true. If, like, I have a Japanese version of the original Smash Bros. The only thing I've noticed is different sound audio clips that they use for the characters. But that's such a good point. I didn't even think about that or even know that they released different versions to the different regions. It's really cool.
We're talking kind of like about little really minor changes, either within the cracks of the fixing glitches and mechanical stuff, or I think one of the most major differences that I can think of from being told about in different versions of an N64 game was actually in Ocarina of Time. There's the mirror shield symbol is altered in later releases because it was found to be culturally insensitive.
Yeah, also I think the Fire Temple had its music changed.
Because it was like some kind of a chant. Which I'll need to look up again what it was exactly. But I think it's good that they were able to. I think it's good that even back then Nintendo was conscious of like, let's change that. That wasn't the right call. But we have the opportunity to fix it, and we will.
Yeah.
But nowadays, when you have patches online, you can also do DLC.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of things in these early games that talks about, like, when you think about a game where there was something missing, like, it looks like this was either an afterthought or, like, they had planned to put something here, where if Mario 64 came out today and was released as it was back then maybe in a few months they would finally add in that thing that they always wanted to do if the game was taking off. Do you guys think that there are any afterthoughts in the game or things that were missing that they would have patched in or put in as DLC had it been a modern game?
That's a really good question. Let me think about it for a second because,
So, just off the top of my head, just like thinking about things that I know annoy people even to this day, maybe reduce the randomness of coins a little bit. when you bop an enemy, sometimes the coins have random velocity just go flying. Sometimes
when you're trying to get that 100 coin run on a level, that could be
I think like Jolly Roger Bay is especially bad, where if some coins get away from you, you basically can't get the 100 coin star.
Oh, shoot.
Just like maybe make flying a little bit easier. Flying is really hard, like really, really hard. Like maybe some larger stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if something like Snowman Land got like a little bit of a rework eventually. It's a pretty boring level. Maybe Rainbow Ride would have some geometry moved around a little bit. I could imagine like Rainbow Ride patch notes, pole moved, 0.3 units downwards to make it so that you can get to it without like doing something screwy.
I really wonder if they would have put a checkpoint system of some sort. Maybe not. Maybe that's like kind of too big in the grand scheme of things. But I mean, you have to imagine if enough people were vocal about it, maybe they would have fun. I mean, they kind of have done that with re-released versions of their older games. To me, that means they are clearly aware that people were having trouble completing certain sections, myself included, in the original or Super Mario on I'm sorry, what is the one called on the original NES?
Super Mario Bros.
It's just Super Mario Bros, right? Yeah, I had a lot of issues on the last world, just trying to get through and to get to Bowser. It's like, oh my god, I'm trying really hard, and so I really wonder if that would have been something they would consider and go, okay, maybe this would help people enjoy the game more.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of Bowser, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to make some of the later incarnations a little more aggressive. Bowser is a real joke.
He sucks. Guy sucks.
All it is like, okay, I gotta throw him in the bomb extra time. Really, he doesn't get any stronger. It's the stage itself.
Yeah.
Although, actually, no, that's not true. In the second battle, he starts ground pounding.
Yeah.
And that will kind of tilt the stage.
I died a lot on that.
That challenged me a little bit.
I didn't feel like it was so much of a challenge. It's just like you had to figure out the puzzle of how to not die when he moved the stage.
And then once you did figure it out, it was like, oh, okay, that's the solution.
Yeah, and then like third incarnation, it was just like, well, the stage is falling away, but that's like not really a big deal.
No, yeah, it's just okay. With him, I always would like, instead of trying to do it in one throw, I would like throw him a little bit closer so I actually had some kind of accuracy. And just run up to him, grab him again, throw him.
I always YOLO throw Bowser.
Always.
Always, 100%. Only YOLO throw.
If I were to think of something, I think that Yoshi felt like kind of an afterthought.
Oh, totally.
The other question, one of the questions I want to ask was whether or not Yoshi seemed like a suitable reward for 100% completion.
Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
You don't even get to ride him.
No.
There's like the whole thing with Yoshi up to that point. Like,
so I think it stands out that in the remake for the 3DS, they added a few extra characters kind of to fill that niche of some extra rewards.
Did you guys play the DS version?
I did not. No.
I think that was actually the first version of the game that I ever actually 100% completed. I got it with my DS when it first came out, and I just fell in love with it. I haven't played it on DS since. I think that one of the coolest things about it was the fact that it was so portable.
Yeah.
And now that I can play the original game on the Switch, same as like we were talking about with Star Fox 64, it's like the better graphics don't really make up for the fact that it's a small screen. But at least with the DS remake of Mario 64, you have like all those other characters to play as. There's more stars. There's more levels. I think even though you're using D-pads, there are times where the control still feels a little bit more solid. Or at least, if not more solid, more reliable. Like even if the control was not as good, it was reliably as good as it was the entire journey.
That's true.
Whereas
Consistency, yeah.
we were talking about how like sometimes the controller for the N64 just didn't give you that angle that it was supposed to. But yeah, I think that's one thing that they would probably do is make Yoshi like a DLC thing and maybe build some extra levels to play around with him in.
Yeah. So one thing that I wanted to ask actually, touching a little bit is this a hard game? we asked a little bit about, we mentioned like Nintendo Hard and such, but is Mario 64 a tough game?
To beat, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
To 100%, yes, and not always for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I agree. I think beating the game is totally feasible for a lot of people. I think I was probably only like 9 or 10, and I beat Mario 60. Right? Like it's kind of like you were saying, where you can do a run where you get the bare minimum, and the bare minimum is not hard to get.
Mm-hmm.
I never did a full completion run.
I never did
just
either.
because there was times when I was playing when I was younger where I went, I don't want to. I don't even want to try. I don't know how.
Yeah.
I don't even know how. So I think you're right. I think the differentiator is you're 100%ing it. It's a hard game,
Mm-hmm.
and that's challenges. That's the cool thing. The challenge is there for you if you want it. If you don't, hey, you can beat it and enjoy it and have a great experience.
Yeah.
And I really like that because in later Mario games, you really unlock later levels by reaching a certain point within the levels you already have unlocked. Whereas with this one, it's really just about the number of stars that you've collected.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of scrape together enough most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Starting in Sunshine, you need to do the first 6 or 7 shines of every level in order to unlock the end of the game.
Yeah. Dude, Sunshine is a pretty tough game.
It is hard. I love
brutal.
Sunshine, though. I love Flood. That's one thing. There were times playing this in this most recent playthrough of 64 where I was like, I kind of wish I had Flood right now. Because those red coins in the Hazy Maze,
one thing that I did realize when I was revisiting the game more recently is how many levels are like really, really simple.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Bomb on Battlefield is probably one of the more extensive levels, but then you've got levels like Lethal Lava Land. They're just kind of a plain of lava with some stuff plopped down in them.
Mm-hmm. I always remembered that being a lot bigger when I was a kid, and getting to the volcano
a lot more
being
intimidating. And
now it's like you can hop to the volcano in like 5 seconds. I guess you always could, but like I never realized how easy it really was. It always felt like such a task.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because the lava itself is such an imposing threat.
I died constantly.
I think so, yeah.
But like once you get over the yips regarding getting over the lava, like it's just another jump. It just happens to be with lava underneath you. Then you're like, okay, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
I think I really need to give it another shot now at my age, just because everything you're saying, like I haven't gone back and played it since I was a kid, and I think you're right. I think at the time I saw each level as this giant, grandiose environment to traverse, and I think you're right. Now going back, I'd probably be like, oh, that's so easy to get from point A to point B. Well, then what was the big deal?
Right. I mean, even areas like Shifting Sandland, which I really enjoy, it's like, this is pretty small.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that challenging to get anywhere.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it was just when you don't know where you're going and you're just exploring, things feel a lot bigger.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. That's true. We know exactly where we're going now, and I think that was a big part of this last playthrough for me. I was like I said, especially getting through the game is not hard if you know which stars you want to get and when you want to get them, and like just how to get to them. Mm-hmm. It becomes a much easier game. And I didn't need to use a guide at all this time. I didn't have access to guides when I was a kid. So I think maybe the fact that I had to figure them out by myself made them so memorable to me that now it's like, I'm never going to forget how to get that star.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I could probably tell you like where the red coin star is in every level, even though I haven't played the game for a few years. And that's just because that was always the star that I got in the level, because at least I could get that one.
Yeah,
so I could be like, okay, if it's, even, what do you call it? Rainbow Ride. It's like, I know exactly where that star is. That's the first one I'd be lined for, because at least I can do that.
All else fails, there's that one.
Yeah.
What is your fondest memories of playing the game? It could be from when you were a kid, more recently.
This is going to be a little bit different, but not playing it personally, but one of my favorite memories of the game is in college. My roommate lived at dorms at college, and him and his roommates would periodically play Mario 64. Like they were on a kind of an N64 binge, just like a retro binge. So they'd play Mario Kart 64, Mario Party, and Mario 64. And one of my favorite memories is watching like this group of 3 dudes on this like shitty couch with an N64 plugged into like a 40-inch like HD TV, and it looks like total ass on the screen. But they were doing the penguin level, and is that the same one that has the slide? That yeah. And so just watching these like 3 big dudes just like white knuckling the N64 controller, like trying to stay on the slide. For whatever reason, it was such a cool kind of like callback, and to realize that this game and games in general can really be timeless.
Yeah.
And the same joy you can get as a kid, you can get just as much or more when you grow up. And that to me is super special, and it kind of sticks in my head when I think about gaming now. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, it doesn't have to be a thing that you can only enjoy when you're young. Gaming is for everyone and anyone who wants to utilize it either for just a social aspect, like an escape. Whether some people use books or whatever, and it's like for me, it's games. Mm-hmm. So it just has a special place in my heart, I think.
So for me, mine is a 2-parter. Mm-hmm. So the first part is, as a kid, I really struggled with the basement, and I really struggled with Bowser 2, or Bowser in the Fiery Sea, and I finally beat him after dying, I don't know how many times, being knocked off of Bowser's Arena or dying randomly in Fire Sea. Finally got it, and when I finally got back up into when I finally got up into the second floor of the castle, there are all these new levels. It was just like, oh my god, finally! There's new content. I'm not constantly dying in fire. This is awesome. Mm-hmm. 10 years later, YouTube is popular, and I look up a Mario 64 speedrun, and doing some kind of weird stuff. It's like, okay, they're like skipping some stuff, and then guy opens the stairs up into the second tier, and then he wall jumps a few times and goes all the way up into the tower, and it's like, oh, those levels are skipped.
That's good.
All that whole sense of wonder and accomplishment, just like, oh,
gone. Really is just ones and zeros.
So funny.
That's so great.
Yeah, back when I think 16 star was like the fastest way to beat the game.
Oh, man, for me, it'd be so I have older brothers for the most part, one older sister too, but they're all 10 plus years older than me. Only one of them was really a gamer, my brother Danny, and he played SNES a lot, like all the time. He had all the games for Super Nintendo, and I would always play with him or play the games that he had and ask him for help because he'd beaten them all already. We never really got an N64 at my mom's house. We had like rented one a couple of times. Over at my dad's house, I would visit there every other weekend, and he did have a N64, and so that's where I started to like play those games all the time. And so on the occasion where I would maybe get to borrow my dad's Nintendo 64 and bring it back to my mom's house, or if we rented one from Blockbuster for the weekend.
I remember doing that, renting
a system. Yeah. Oh my god. See, kids, back in the day.
Oh man.
So I used to think, like, I think it was one of those times when I had the console at my mom's house and I was playing through. I think it was Mario 64, but I think it was Thwomp's Fortress. And my brother, who was like the master of Super Mario World, like I had him trying to get to the top of the tower in the second star of Thwomp's Fortress, and he was like all of his 2D platforming skills, I think, were not translating over into 3D. Yeah. And he like handed off the controller to me, like, here, did you get that? And I was like, you're asking me to be the hard part for you? Like, I'm a grown up now.
Nice.
There was that moment. Yeah. To me, that was like my fondest memory of playing the game.
That's really sweet.
I have a lot of really fond memories, but
I think we've mostly.
I think that I think I've come up at the end of the stuff. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's about it. What do you think? Is there anything more you wanted to say?
I'd say I would have one final question.
Yes.
If Nintendo makes another 3D Mario game, which I have a feeling they probably will. It's a strong IP for them, big money maker. What do you think it'll look like? And do you think there will be still, like, you can still see kind of the skeletal structure in current 3D Mario games. Do you think there will still be some of that from Mario 64 and whatever they create in the future? Are there things you would love to see stay or make a return from Mario 64 in the future games? Or do you want them to kind of rework and retool
That's a really good question.
what they've created thus far?
And that's tough because currently the current gen of 3D Mario is already split into two different directions. We have the Odyssey, which is sort of like the next evolution of what we know to be 3D Mario, based off of going from 64 to Sunshine to Galaxy and onward. But then we also have 3D Land and 3D World, which is really more of a 3D translation of those direct point A to point B style levels of the classic Mario series. And then actually third, we have Bowser's Fury now, which I don't know if either of you have really gotten a chance to play yet. But that's sort of like an open world take on 3D World.
Okay.
So it's got like a lot of the same platforming, but it's like one big open space. So it's like it's as if an Odyssey or Super Mario 64 Land level had been made much bigger and filled with more like traditional Mario platforming type stuff. You can still tackle it from multiple angles, it feels like, but like each angle that you take is still going to be a specific platforming challenge. A little less cheesing going on. I think that was a really smash success last year. I would love to see more of that happen. Like if we could see that become a more fully realized version of itself, and then have a game where instead of just one big area like that, you would still have multiple different levels of different themes that are built more like that, rather than, like you said this earlier about Odyssey, Adrien, and the more that since you said it, because you're like, I disagree that it's really bigger. Like I've been thinking about it, and I think you're right. It's not really bigger. It's just differently shaped in a way. Like the levels, they disguise their size a little bit better. Whereas I think if you look at Bowser's Fury, there's a little bit less of that going on. It's legitimately pretty big for what it is. So if we could just see a game that's like 10 to 15 of those levels, like that being about the entirety of Bowser's Fury being one level, that would be, I think, what I would want to see from the next 3D Mario.
Yeah, I mean, I think what do I think will be the next 3D Mario and what do I want are going to be two very different things. You know, I am really heartened to see with like Mario Odyssey them returning to that formula. You know, the time between Mario Galaxy releasing and Mario Odyssey releasing was quite long. I think it was something like 10 years. And even at the time, even though Mario Galaxy was quite good, a lot of people kind of saw this kind of backsliding towards making the game more linear, making it really more kind of about gimmicks. Even with the fun new elements of Galaxy, making it more linear. I think Odyssey, while a breath of fresh air, didn't entirely move away from those. And it's like, if I want to see a new 3D Mario game, I really would love to see going back to having a hub world. Having those separate levels that you can move between. And I don't necessarily think that the game needs to be bigger or that the levels need to be significantly bigger. But I would like to see the elimination of some of the dead levels. Things like Snowman Land, where it's like there's not really much going on here, or the stars that really don't require very much to accomplish. In fact, that's one of my complaints about Mario Odyssey is that most of the levels are so full of stuff. It doesn't matter where you go.
There's no need to explore because you can just go off in one direction. You'll get all the moons that you need.
And it really makes each moon feel less significant.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, I got the same amount of moons for ground pounding this random bump in the ground as I did for doing this crazy platforming challenge.
Exactly.
Like,
a lot of the areas in Mario Odyssey, you could get enough moons to leave the area before you completed the story of the area. And I found myself routinely staying in the area longer than I needed to just because I wanted to at least see everything that it had to show me.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And I would really love to see a like what you had in 64, a reason to maybe go back to earlier levels,
Mm-hmm.
So that you could still make overall progress.
Mm-hmm.
You could still, if you were stuck in the basement, you could return to Bomb Battlefield and be like, maybe I can get the 7th star. Maybe I can figure out how to get to this flippin' island way up in the sky or something.
Yeah.
So I'd really like to see that. And it's not necessarily that, like, we need every level to be this massive open world thing with 5 billion pieces of content, but more kind of fun, open sandbox levels with some interesting objectives that you can do sequentially. And I'm not sure that will happen, but that's my hope. What I do think will probably return is I think we'll continue to see some platforming assist mechanics. We saw them from everything after Mario 64. Mm-hmm. I think Nintendo realized precise platforming, especially precise platforming in 3D, is really hard. We talked about the frustrations of just the control stick, but it's just hard in general. Even if you have a drop shadow, it's really easy to just step off the ledge. So you saw these assist mechanics. You had Flood that let you hover to help you kind of guide yourself down on the platforms. In Galaxy, you had the extra spin jump, which mattered a little bit less, but with its mechanics, it also wasn't as big of a deal. There were less like drop deaths and such. And then in Odyssey, you had Cappy, which was an enormous platform assist. And I think those are probably here to stay. What I do hope is that they'll be more like Cappy, but maybe not quite as powerful. Cappy is like, if you see a really skilled player playing with that, I mean, you can basically fly. It's ridiculous.
Somewhere between Flood and Cappy, I think.
Yeah.
Because like Flood, you couldn't really go very far with it. It was where Cappy you could cover a really great distance. Flood gave you a little bit more of that accuracy in the landing.
Yeah, it was just slow.
Yeah, so if you could have something that's like Flood but a little faster, or Cappy but like you said a little more nerfed, that'd be nice. But I do think the assist mechanic is a big plus.
Yeah. Well, one thing I hated about Flood was the number of times that I had clearly missed the jump but held on to Flood just above death, knowing I was going to die.
You're just like
get that little extra bit of distance.
Watching that candle burn out.
Yeah.
How about you, Joel? What do you think about the next 3
Oh, man. I'm going to go way into left field, and I know this will never happen, but I think it would be something that could be so cool and unique. My dream 3D Mario would be, it's like, let's mix Luigi's Mansion with Mario 64. So Luigi returns to the castle, but it's like, let's say it's like almost directly after the timeline of events that have happened in Mario 64, because Mario's missing. So very like, it's Luigi's Mansion, right? I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird. But the castle is like dilapidated and run down and looks haunted.
Ooh.
And he walks in, and all the paintings that are in Mario 64 have been switched out to different paintings, like haunted versions. Not haunted versions. Let's just say haunted type paintings. And so it's more of like a darker, creepier Mario 64 where you play as Luigi. What everyone wanted.
And would you still be platforming like you would as Mario and not using the poltergust?
Yes, yeah, it'd be more. It would be a platformer, and I agree. And I think the assist that Adrien was talking about would be awesome to have in something like this. So like a modernized take with some of the elements that we've seen in more modern titles. I just like the idea of like a haunted Peach's Castle with Luigi going in, just because I'm a huge Luigi's Mansion fan. So
me too.
I think
that's going to be an episode.
I know this will totally. I know that version of a 3D Mario would never happen, but that to me would be really cool.
I would play the hell out of that.
It just sounds really awesome.
That sounds really great.
I do have to say, I would love to see Peach's Castle be expanded a little bit.
Yeah.
I think the best one we've seen is probably in Paper Mario.
Which one?
I think 1,000 Year... Wait, is it? No.
You don't really see Peach's Castle in 1,000 Year Door because you're in that other, I think, it's like a whole other country or something like that.
No, it's the original Paper Mario where you
Okay.
really get to wander around Peach's Castle a lot. And I'd love to see a slightly expanded one. Because I always wanted there to just be a little bit more of Peach's Castle in 64.
Yeah, I agree. I was there's that in the end game of Odyssey, you can visit Peach's Castle as like its own kingdom
And it's
level.
minuscule.
It's minuscule, and you can't go inside the castle.
You can.
You
It's
can?
just
Oh,
really,
okay.
really small.
Okay, I'm misremembering it then, but maybe because it was so small that it's like not worth remembering.
Yeah, it's just one room. It's basically just the entryway.
Oh, okay,
and
I
it's
meant
much
you can't really
smaller.
explore it though.
Yeah,
That's a bummer.
it's disappointing.
It's why would they make it? You'd think they would make it bigger.
And the grounds are huge. It's like what?
There's nothing to
What
do
if,
there.
what if you
right?
did
Like-
the What if you did the other thing?
Yeah.
What if you made the castle big and the ground small?
I mean, could you imagine, like, you get all the way to the end of Odyssey, and, like, the big completion bonus of Odyssey is that you get to re-explore all of Mario 64 but with Odyssey mechanics?
That's what I thought was going to happen, and I was so disappointed.
That's such a letdown.
I did
Oh,
not
man.
return to Odyssey after that.
At least it was the end of the game.
Yeah. And everybody was like, oh yeah, there's this whole thing, there's like, you can do world peace and get all this, and like revisit all the levels and have to do a whole bunch more content. I'm like, but that's not what I wanted.
I don't want that.
I wanted the
Mario 64.
levels.
That's what I wanted. Fun.
Yep. All right.
I think that's about good. What do you think?
Yep. I
That was a
think
good,
so.
a good question to end on.
Yeah.
That would be a fun one, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, Joel.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yep. Thanks for
And,
having me again.
And Joel, thank you we're recording in your place right now.
Yeah,
So
no
thank you
problem.
for allowing us to use your space for that. Everybody listening at home, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platforms you found us on. That is, if you enjoyed the show, which I'm hoping if you made it all the way to what have we been recording for, like 2 hours now. So if you made it to 2 hours, I'm guessing that means you liked it. So please go ahead and like, follow, and subscribe. If you haven't already, go and check out our other episodes that we have up. In the meantime, I hope to see you next time, and stay nerdy. I'm really glad actually that you brought up the penguin slide because we were talking about what would happen with that other penguin child.
Yeah.
Like if you bring it, like, so I'm wondering if maybe that child is the sliding penguin, and that's like the extreme sports dad that like doesn't really care too much about his kids. The kid is just like wandering around the mountainside.
Tragic. So tragic.
Dad's too busy freebasing
Oh my god.
snow slides.
So it's like he's getting some wicked gnar.
Shredding it up.
Gnar.
All right.